You've probably heard people talk about putting their assets in a trust, right? It's one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot, but what does it actually mean? Especially for us here in South Africa. You know, a trust can be an amazing, powerful tool for protecting your wealth, but it's also wrapped up in a whole lot of confusion. So in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain and make it all make sense.
So here's what we've got on the agenda. First up, we're going to break down what a trust actually is. Then, we'll get into the really powerful reasons why you might want to consider one. After that, we'll look at the different flavors of trusts you can choose from, and finally, we're going to get real about the costs and the serious commitment involved.
I absolutely love this quote because it just hits the nail on the head. So often, people think of trusts as these magical solutions that'll solve every single financial problem they have. But the truth, as we're about to find out, is way more complex and, frankly, way more interesting. It's not magic. It's a strategic legal tool.
All right, so let's start with the absolute basics. What in the world are we talking about when we say the word trust? Let's break down that core structure.
Okay, the easiest way to think of a trust is like a secure box with a very specific set of instructions. First up, you have the founder. That's you. And you put your assets, maybe your house or some investments, into this box. Then you appoint trustees. These are the guardians of the box, and their job is to follow your instructions to the letter. And finally, you have the beneficiaries, the people, maybe your kids or grandkids, who get to benefit from what's in the box. Now here's the most important part. Once those assets are in the box, they don't legally belong to you anymore. They belong to the trust itself. That's a huge deal.
All right, so you've gone to all the trouble of putting your assets into this separate legal box. Why? Why would anyone do that? Well, this is where it gets really interesting, because the benefits are powerful, and it's why trusts are such a big deal in South African estate planning.
Let's run through the big advantages here. First, asset protection. This is huge. Once your assets are in the trust, they're generally shielded from your personal creditors. If you're a business owner, that's massive. Next, it makes estate planning so much smoother. Trust assets don't get stuck in the long, slow process of winding up an estate, and you can save a bundle on executor's fees. We're talking up to 4% of your entire estate's value. You also get continuity and privacy, and this last one's so important. You can protect inheritances for your kids or other family members until they're old enough and wise enough to handle the money themselves.
And this right here, this is one of the most incredible things about a trust. It doesn't have a lifespan. It's not a person. A trust can literally exist forever. That means it can hold and manage something like a family farm or a business seamlessly across multiple generations, creating a stable foundation for your legacy long, long after you're gone.
So how does this all stack up against just having a regular will? Well, a will only kicks into gear after you die, and the whole process is public record. A living trust, what we call an inter vivos trust, starts working the second you set it up. It keeps all your financial business private, and like we said, it offers way better protection from creditors. Look, a will is absolutely essential, but a trust, it plays in a whole different league when it comes to managing and protecting your assets.
Okay, so the benefits are pretty clear, but hold on. Not all trusts are the same. Now we're going to dive into the different types you can get in South Africa, because choosing the right structure for your specific goals is absolutely critical.
The first big split is all about when the trust is created. An inter vivos trust, that's just fancy Latin for living trust, is one you set up while you're alive. This is the one you use for all that proactive asset protection and serious estate planning. On the other hand, a testamentary trust is actually written into your will, and it only springs to life after you pass away. Its main job is usually to protect an inheritance for your kids.
And it doesn't stop there. There are even more specialized options. You've got special trusts, which are fantastic tools with big tax advantages if you're providing for a beneficiary with a disability. Then there are charitable trusts for nonprofit work, and even business trusts that are designed specifically to run a company. The variety just shows you how incredibly flexible this whole structure can be.
So far, trusts sound amazing, don't they? But remember that quote from the beginning about them not being magic boxes? Well, this is where we get to the reality check. We need to talk about the costs, the admin, and the potential drawbacks, because this is not a set it and forget it kind of deal.
Let's talk numbers first, the upfront cost. To get a trust professionally drafted and registered with the Master of the High Court, you're probably looking at a range of 10 to 30,000 Rand, and honestly, sometimes even more, depending on how complicated it all is.
And the costs don't just stop there. Nope. This is where the real commitment kicks in.
You need to do annual financial statements. The trust needs its own bank account. It has to file its own tax return every year. The trustees have to hold formal meetings and actually write down minutes. And if you use a professional trustee, which you really should, their fees can add another 20 to 100,000 Rand or more every single year. It's a serious undertaking.
Now let's bust a huge myth about tax. A lot of people think a trust will automatically save them a ton of tax, but just look at these numbers. If a trust earns income and just holds on to it, that income gets taxed at a flat rate of 45%. That is the highest personal rate there is, and it's way higher than the company tax rate of 27%. So the big takeaway here is that without some really careful planning, a trust can actually be tax inefficient.
And oh my goodness, this next one is a huge drawback that catches so many people by surprise. If you put your main home, the one you live in, into a trust, you lose out on the personal R2 million capital gains tax exemption that you get when you sell it. That is a massive tax-free benefit to just give away. You have to think really hard about that one.
This little table sums it all up so well. If you're buying the house you're going to live in, keeping it in your personal name is usually the best bet. But if your main goal is long-term estate planning or protecting your assets from business risks, then a trust is an excellent tool, even with that high tax rate. See? It all depends on what you're trying to achieve. This right here is a critical warning. If you start treating the trust assets like your own personal piggy bank, the courts actually call this an alter ego trust. That legal shield we talked about can be completely shattered. If you get sued or go through a divorce, a court could just ignore the trust entirely. That's why having a professional, independent trustee is so important. They're like the referee, making sure all the rules are followed so that legal protection stays strong.
So, at the end of the day, a trust is really a structure designed to build a bridge that lets your wealth and your legacy cross safely from one generation to the next. It offers incredible protection, incredible continuity. But, as we've seen, building that bridge comes with a real cost and a heavy administrative weight. So the final question is for you. Considering your own goals and your own life, is this the right bridge for you to build? The answer is going to take some careful thought and almost certainly some really good professional advice.